welcome everyone to Pointing at the Moon and our conversations here in the Peace Pagoda at the beautiful Providence Zen Center. We're joined today by Il Sunim. Il Sunim is our Head Dharma Teacher here at the Providence Zen Center and an ordained monk in the Chogye order of Korean Buddhism. He has been instrumental here at the Zen Center, not just providing the teachings and guiding others and leading many of our retreats during Kyol Che, but also for helping to revolutionize the way that we interface with others in terms of our technology, streaming, and outreach. He is both a long practicing monk as well as an artist. And Il Sunim, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's good to be here.
So you're the second Sunim that we've been able to chat to since beginning this sort of thing, and it's always a privilege. For those who don't really know your story, what first attracted you to Zen Buddhism and what brought you to this path?
Yeah, that's always, I still look at that sometimes because it's kind of like a string of mistakes in a way. It's not something that really makes sense. You can't put pieces together and say, oh, I had this influence. Especially because I came from Louisiana. There really wasn't any kind of practicing tradition there at all. And that was before the internet too. So it was more like just naturally it arose. I think I spent a lot of time out in the forest, and just from being in nature and having to adapt to that of just being alone in nature for long periods of time. I was out in the deep forest area. Then you kind of get a natural form of meditation, of just having the day pass and being out in the fields, and whatever that is, something happened out there. And later on, when I became a teenager, a little older, and started to suffer more, and that kind of ripened, and I was ready, just then already I found the path, just from magazines, just trying to understand something. I already had some kind of yoga program, then I started doing practice. So it was really natural, and it didn't match any of my circumstance. It's just, you kind of know sometimes when something is right. And as soon as I read some Zen teaching, it just exploded, that was it.
What do you remember the Zen teaching that you read, or was it a particular piece? I know you often mention Tawi as one of your...
I love Tawi, yeah. Tawi is kind of, the greatest of the Chinese Zen masters. But that was a long time ago. I don't really remember. It was a lot of Japanese poetry, really beautiful, poignant things, like Basho, some of those. Dogen, I always loved Dogen. But yeah, I think Tawi, he was a very pivotal figure in the progression of Zen from China to Korea and Japan. That was like the turning point. Like we always think of Rinzai. In Zen, there's two forms, Rinzai and Soto, in Japan anyway. And really Rinzai can be traced back to him. That was before. Tawi was the one that kind of formulated that. And in Korea, it became the Hadu. So that's a whole nother subject though.
Well, what is Hadu then? What is that kind of practice?
That's sort of the basis. That's the difference between Korean and Japanese Zen. So the Hadu it's kind of like the initial part of the Japanese training where you hold a koan for a long time, like mu. But eventually you work through it and there is an answer and you go on to there's 1,000 konans to work on. But in Korea, you hold a root question, such as, what am I? That was the one that we use a lot, what am I? And you hold it forever, you never resolve it. It's kind of like it brings you in to investigate, what is this, right? It's always pointing you to something. Eventually you can find it, but it's not something that can be resolved with a simple answer. So it's just a technique to change the focus from external things to inward. And where is this thing coming from?
Yeah, so you mentioned the transition of Buddhism from India to China and China to Japan and Korea, and Hadu is the distinction between kind of our Japanese and Korean. You yourself spent quite a few years over in Korea, isn't that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, what was your experience of being a monastic over in Korea like? And what was different for you when you came back over here to the US?
Well, it's hard to put that into words. I originally went to Korea because I had actually, this was my second time to do monastic training. The first time, my father was very ill. I came back after a few years and just started working in LA and just having a normal life. And after about 6 years, I returned to practice when that situation had resolved. And at that time, that was after about 20 years since I really started of practice. At that time, I sat down on the cushion and I was just trying to remember all of the teachings and what I was doing there. And I remember very poignant this moment, a very strong moment where I realized at that point I'd had a lot of suffering in LA, just trying to survive and reconfigure my life at that point, that I just didn't really have a strong grasp on my life anymore, that I could just let go of it. I guess maybe it was my age too, I was about 40, but I just let go. And then my mind was suddenly very, very porous, very easy to go deeply into meditation. So that was the first time that I really saw what this is all about. That's why I went to Korea. Again, that's why I trained to become a monk, because it just became so bright and wonderful, right? So my experience at that point was just needing to make a solid life and have that be in the center and not be busy doing other things all the time, but really respect that and develop it. And so it's like a crucible if you become a monastic. All you do is train. We do 2-3 month retreats every year, and in between you're constantly doing practice, and there's all kinds of things that are pointing you back to that. And so that's what really Korea was about. It's just, and you go, and it's kind of like an indoctrination. It takes 6 to 8 years to go through the program and to finish all the different stages. The Tibetan have a similar training if you want to become a Rinpoche. Like you have to do 3-year retreats, you have to finish 1 million prostrations. There's so many things about it. It's just like, it's kind of like preparing you for the path. So it was a pleasure to go through it. And there were like 70 other monks that I trained with over there. And the community is the whole thing. Like, together you can, support each other, learn from each other. And it's really a brotherhood. I don't think you could do practice without a Sangha, really. It's too hard.
And how's your experience been since coming back here to the U.S., where we don't have as strong of a monastic tradition and monastic Sangha? You got Kwan Heng Sunim, but
yeah, we have other monks. There's only a few in the United States, actually. Yeah. It's the same as when I was doing, after my return to practice in LA, I started doing long retreats, like 100-day retreats just by myself in the wilderness. And they were so powerful, so wonderful. But I got to the point where, and then I would do group retreats, that it didn't matter if people were there or not. It was the same, it would be a different components to it, but the energy was the same. And that was a long time ago, so it just doesn't, that never came up. I think it's exactly the same here or Korea or wherever, or with a big group or a small group. It's like it's just communicating that to others. You already have the space that you're in. So I certainly haven't missed it. I like being in my home country and just being able to communicate freely. I don't know Korean that well. That was another part too. I couldn't really communicate with people. So I was in my own mental space a lot. But that helps in a lot of ways because people understand human things very easily. And the rest is not really important. So, very powerful experience. I'm glad I went.
Thank you. One of your other duties here, kind of unofficially, is the kind of welcomer and greeter for all the folks who sort of come in just off the street and whatnot. And I've been reflecting a little bit in my own life. I've noticed that one of the things a lot of young people, especially young people who are interested in this path, tend to really think about is whether or not I should become a monk or not. And so what kind of advice would you give people who are thinking about, is a monastic path right for me, or how do I kind of dedicate myself more to this practice?
And I think earlier in my life, I would have advised against it, because it's a complete night and day change from a normal life. It's very, very arduous, a lot of the training. It takes a lot of willpower, and it in some ways destroys your life because you can't have a job or a family or a house, and your family name gets cut. It's a very big thing, right? But now that I've gone deeply into it and I see what it is, well, it's certainly worth all of that to really know yourself and to really go deeply into the nature of existence. I mean, it's a very rewarding. But if a young person comes in, generally I can tell where their mind is and if they're going to go deeply into it or not. So I don't really talk about that much unless I can see that they're very open to it. But I think what's changed now is, well, society's changed a lot. And people are already in a lot of turmoil. And they're not able to sit a long retreat, which is really crucial to this work. So I think the monastic path now is good for anyone, really. If you want to go deeply into your true nature and figure that stuff out and resolve those things, the monastic path is really wonderful. You can just go into it and just train, do long retreats, have a lot of support, learn a lot, and then you'll figure out later you'll know what to do later. You can always come back and do something else. So I think it's going to open up more to people what it is.
Was there something about the monastic path for you that really surprised you or kind of took you kind of unawares as you had entered into it? Maybe something you thought would be very hard and wasn't, or maybe something completely unexpected?
Well, it's very easy to enter. Very easy. It's just a real brief ceremony, like we're having a conversation here, and somebody drags a knife across your head and you're in. And it's so easy to go in. It's really, really hard to go out. I've heard it's harder than a divorce. And I've done it, and it was devastating. But I think the surprising thing is when you do ordain, then you're automatically, a whole world of anxiety is gone. And it's like you're in this supportive, warm community and a family. It's so wonderful that I had no idea that was there, or that you could live that way.
Wow, what an amazing thing. So, in addition to you being a monastic, you're also an artist and a worker as well. You do woodwork, you do filmography, I believe. You also play music. Any arts I'm leaving out there?
I'm a writer.
Oh, a writer as well. Okay. Yeah, tell us a little bit more about that part of your life as well. Where's the intersection with the art that you do? And tell us more about that.
That's a big thing. I think in the beginning, I remember I was playing guitar a lot when I was younger, which a lot of young men did, and my, Gen X people. And I had to decide, do I want to really pursue this as, a life path, or do I want to study meditation? At one point I had to make that decision. And I chose to go on to meditation and to practice Zen. And I'm very glad that I did. But later, maybe, 10 years later, after I got through, the discipline and learning all the forms and being able to sit well, then it came back. And it's like that is really, practice includes everything. Basically, the truth is everything is practice. So you don't have to segment and say, I can't do that because I'm doing meditation. I mean, all of it is part of knowing the self. It's not refined, limited to just what happens on the cushion. And everything in your life is contacting the truth. So it shouldn't be that you don't do anything or you can't know truth. I mean, that's ridiculous. And our lives are so complicated now. So to me, that is really, And meditation is a resonance, it's a rhythm. There's something about it that's musical, and we do chants, and writing too, prose, all of these things are expressions of the Dharma. And however they come out, it's like you don't restrain it, you just let your inner voice come out. And it's a wonderful vehicle for that. I don't see how you can practice without having and manifesting it, right? Just keeping it inside. I mean, we can talk about it, but that's only one level. If you write, it's already more complex, right? You can do much more refined introspection with writing, and plus, there's not a time limit. I can just go over something and refine it, and the teachings that are there are amazing. That I would never have if I didn't do that introspection.
You're here with us here at the Providence Zen Center now, and we're all kind of experiencing this American Buddhism, whatever that means, together.
Right, yeah.
Where do you see this going in the next 30, 50 years with, as you mentioned, kind of the complexity of the world and the suffering, but also the greater need for this than ever before?
Yeah, that's really an unknown, that nobody's been able to crack that one. Really, we're still Korean, our Zen that we practice here, because we're like the second generation. We haven't really become our own. I don't know, I'm from Louisiana, so I would love to go back there, like to go to New Orleans and start a small center and incorporate some voodoo or some zydeco music, there's so much, we have such a rich culture. Even we were talking about, when we're doing some kind of video program, we're not Asian. We don't need to have a flute, for the music. What is our music? Even that we haven't answered. Maybe the piano has some spiritual bone to it. I don't know. But that's the art of it, is figuring that out. And that's what we're doing, really, is slowly. But we can't really move into some kind of pure American expression, because we have to hold the tradition, and we have elders that are keeping it very much what it is right now. They don't want any change. So it's not something that's going to evolve very fast. And the young people too, I don't know, because there's really not much space in their minds now, in their lives, to go into these kind of deep practices and long-term retreats, right? So I don't know. I think it's going to change quite a lot in the next generation. They have to be able to do it very quickly, It has to have an edge to it that we don't have. So I think that really depends on the next generation.
If there was one thing you would advise the next generations after us to not lose from this practice, what would it be?
Well, the whole thing is to me, if I have to put it in a very simple way, is to put it all down. Put down all of your ambition, cares, and loves. Everything has to go down. And then the true self is already there. It arises. And that's really the magic, that fulcrum, if you can do it. So you have to be able to disassociate a little bit from all your construction, all your entity, all the things that you think about as yourself. Then you're halfway there already. Just be able to get a little bit of separation from that and not take it too seriously. If you can do that, then one of our great Zen masters said, then you don't need to practice. If your life is very straightforward. So, yeah, that's my advice. Look at that ego thing very closely.
Did you have some questions for me or anything that maybe you want to bring out of me? Yeah,
we have different lives, but we're very similar in a way. You're the one person that I know in the communities that I've been in that is really good with living in a community. You're very comfortable and you have a natural affinity with this life. And you were thinking about being a monastic too, right? Is that right?
That's right.
But you're also very well educated. You have to work a lot to pay off your college debts, all of those problems. So I was just curious about that. How can you resolve that with your busy life? Mm-hmm. Or do you have a path through to going deeply into practice?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And it's an answer that I've never quite nailed down that this is it and it's kind of working consistently. The most important thing for me to really try and be able to let myself go deep in my practice has been to put myself in the circumstances where I'm best able to do that. So you're right, I do work quite a lot, especially in the past month or so. But I also know that this is very important in my life. And that's why for me, a place like the Providence Zen Center, a place where I can be a resident, the place where I can, every day be able to wake up and go to practice, and in evenings too, and just make it easier to do so for me, has really been kind of that function to try and make sure that even when I'm falling off, there's something there to kind of bring me back in. So it really is a constant kind of balancing act in my life so far. And I have some hope and faith that eventually it's going to resonate and rectify itself in the correct way. But, until then, for me, I really want to make sure that I'm keeping the circumstances set up for me so that I don't lose it. Because I'm honestly really scared that if I move out of here, or if I do something like that, I'm quickly just going to become overwhelmed with everything and totally forget about these kind of things, start making excuses and that sort of thing. And I don't want that to happen. And I know my mind is very clever and it will quickly think of reasons not to come to practice if I let it. Does that sort of get it at it?
Yeah, I think my feeling, since I'm older than you and I've been through kind of that, it's like you don't really want to enter into monastic training until your life is resolved to some extent.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't resolve itself. I think there's always going to be things that are unresolved. But especially this kind of, you have a very technical life, you have a lot of expertise. So that is its own path already. And if you just stop, then there's going to be some schism,
Yeah.
It's not easy to change like that. But I think once you digest it, once you kind of figure out whatever it is, however that's going to evolve, and you're done with it, then you'll be our great monk, I'm sure.
Thank you.
Or whatever you do, it doesn't have to be monastic.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And yeah, I can barely imagine what I'm having for breakfast tomorrow morning, let alone what the next year is going. Chances are it's going to be oatmeal, to be honest. But yeah, life is fairly uncertain for me right now, and right. I know at least in that uncertainty that I can rely on, not just this practice, but this community here at the Zen Center as an anchor. Yourself, Kwan Sunim, Dennis, So Young, Ju Hee, being able to wake up every day and see you guys. I have some faith that, and maybe this is one of the reasons why living in a community is harmonious for me or easier. I just really have faith that somehow doing that, being around you guys is helpful for me, just kind of in that and seeing you all and relating with you all every single day. So thank you, Il Sunim, just again for coming and speaking and letting us learn more about you and just having some conversations with me. We've been living together and practicing together for a while now, and we had that month up at Kyol Che, so thank you very much, and know how much everyone appreciates and respects you. And thank all of you for joining us for our conversation today. This has been Pointing to the Moon here in our beautiful Peace Pagoda at the Providence Zen Center. I wish you all well, and I hope you all come join us soon. So thank you.